Hello, welcome to our animated philosophy series, where we explore timeless concepts in a modern context. Today, we're going to explore Hegel's dialectical approach and its application to history, which is one of philosophy's most difficult yet intriguing topics. Hegel was a very ambitious philosopher. He made an attempt to explain how human history proceeds in a logical manner, leading to the realization of human freedom. Before we connect Hegel's dialectical method to historical events, allow me to explain it. Hegel's dialectic, to put it simply, is a process in which contradictions propel advancement. The thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis are the three steps that this process normally goes through. A notion or initial state is called the thesis. Its opponent, or the opposite approach, is called the antithesis. The resolution that brings these opposing parts together without just going back to the starting point is called the synthesis. Instead, the synthesis yields a new, more advanced state. Hegel applies the framework of dialectics to the history of humanity. He believes that history is a process in which freedom is progressively realized to a greater and greater extent, rather than being a collection of chance events. Human societies constantly evolve, but always via contradictions and how they are resolved. Every historical era denotes a distinct phase in this enormous evolution of human consciousness and freedom. Consider this instance. Think about the shift from feudalism to contemporary democracy. Under the strict hierarchical feudal system of medieval Europe, the nobles, a small elite, held the majority of authority while the mass of the people, peasants and serfs, had very little freedom. The thesis in this case was a system built on inequity and dominance. But as time went on, contradictions, the opposite antithesis, began to show up within this feudal order. The old order was threatened by the rising merchant class, the increasing influence of towns, and the dissemination of Enlightenment concepts of equality and individual rights. Tensions in society and politics sprang from these discrepancies. The previous power structures were violently toppled in revolutions like the French Revolution when the system grew more and more unstable. The consequence of this was the development of contemporary democratic states, where the value of individual freedom rose to prominence. This is the synthesis, or the balance that got maintained after the conflict between thesis and antithesis. Naturally, there are inconsistencies in this new system as well, such as the conflict between authority and liberty and economic inequality, which motivates ongoing reform. But the core idea is that every historical period, despite its struggles and opposition, marks a step towards greater freedom. Hegel holds that the world spirit, or Geist, is in charge of this dialectical process and not chance. The rational force that propels history towards the achievement of freedom is known as the world spirit, and it takes the form of institutions and human behavior. According to this perspective, all of history's pain, wars, and revolutions have a purpose. They are essential stages on the path to human self-realization. Hegel also makes the important point that human consciousness is evolving in a process that is similar to this historical tendency. For example, in the ancient world, the majority of people were subject to tyrannical regimes in which the rulers were the only ones who had true freedom. More people become aware of their freedom as history progresses and as political, philosophical, and religious organizations emerge. By the time we reach the modern world, freedom is recognized as a fundamental human right. Let's now discuss Hegel's well-known dictum, the real is rational, and the rational is real. What Hegel is saying here is that what genuinely exists, or the real, is not chaotic or meaningless. Rather, it adheres to a rational procedure. Everything that occurs, including historical disputes and contradictions, has a rational purpose since it contributes to the development of freedom. No matter how violent or confusing it may appear, history is illuminating a rational order that is being resolved via the dialectical process. That said, the rational is also real. In other words, Hegel is arguing that the apparent chaos of events is actually the rational structure that underlies true reality. The true substance of history is not so much the individual events as it is the process of growth that each one represents. Thus, while wars, revolutions, and crises may be evident in history, Hegel would argue that these events are simply manifestations of a deeper rational process, namely the advance towards greater freedom and self-awareness. In summary, Hegel views history as a dialectical process propelled by contradictions, in which every historical stage signifies a fresh, increasingly sophisticated experience of freedom. There is a greater purpose for the wars and upheavals in history, which is to further the advancement of human society. Furthermore, he believed that history follows a logical sequence that leads to the realization of human freedom. This belief is reflected in his well-known assertion that the real is rational and the rational is real. That is the essence of Hegel's historical perspective, and it compels us to reflect on the conflicts that exist in our world today in all their complexity. Are they just happening at random? Or may they be a component of a more extensive developmental process that is bringing us closer to freedom? It's a question we can reflect on as we continue studying philosophy and history. Thank you for learning with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more insights into similar echoes.